Well, for even more analysis on the German elections, I'm joined now in the studio by our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Hi, Doug.
Morning.
Good morning. So the German elections, as we've seen, are a complex process. We have the numerical results now, but it's just starting now, that battle.
Yeah, and it must be frustrating. I mean, a lot of our viewers are probably tuning in, and if they don't follow German politics closely, or politics in general that closely, they're probably like, well, who won? We know that Angela Merkel is no longer going to be chancellor. She wasn't running in this election. So who won? You want an answer, and you're not going to get one for weeks. And here's the issue here. And the big tent parties, the conservative Christian Democrats, the left of center Social Democrats, they have basically ruled Germany, either in the case of the Christian Democrats with a smaller party in the opposition, in a coalition for all of Germany's post-war history. Now we have this messy, very loud, boisterous, raucous scenario shaping up in which you have two of those so-called former mainstream Big Tent parties, one conservative, one on the left, trying to form a coalition potentially with two other parties, these liberals and these Greens, that have nothing to do with one another, have almost ideologically antithetical views. So it raises the question, how will it work? The FDP, the business-friendly so-called liberal, in the European sense of liberal party, they don't want to raise taxes on the rich. They are not for the sort of big spending public investment platform that, say, the Social Democrats and the Greens are for. They want to keep what's called the German debt brake. What is that? It's this technical term. Debt brake literally means that. In the Constitution of Germany, it's been kept, the debt cannot rise above a certain very minimal level, and that has kept Germany from being able to raise spending. And the next chancellor, if it's on a left-leaning chancellor, will want to break out of that to be able to give Germany some more wiggle room to meet the needs of a demographically, a shrinking workforce, lots of bureaucracy, public infrastructure that needs a lot of investment. How are the FDP, how are the Greens? We're told they're in talks among themselves as well. How are they going to see eye to eye, the third and fourth placed parties here, when they're antithetical to each other also on climate change? The Greens and the FDP do not have a lot of the same views in terms of how much investment and what steps should be taken in terms of climate and what should be taken in terms of phasing out fossil fuels, shutting down carbon plants, which as of now, on paper in Germany, the carbon plants will not be phased out until 2038. That is 16 years after the nuclear plants are all shut down. Germany needs renewable energies. It needs it badly. How is it going to make that transition? This is not sort of just like inside politics. The answers to these questions and this coalition building within Germany are going to have great implications for Europe and the world beyond.
And Doug, that messy process that you described, all of the bickering is going to come in stark contrast, of course, to the 16 years of relative stability under Angela Merkel. And of course, her reputation for being a kind of consensus maker, somebody that's able to find compromise.
Yeah.
Who will ever be able to fill her shoes both at home and on the world stage?
Probably no one, right? Because based on what I just said, we're seeing an erosion of that, big tent, steady as she goes type of leadership, whether under one or the other party or in a grand coalition between the two. Angela Merkel was the personification of what you just said. When we talk about her, take any article, Google anything about Angela Merkel, you will hear steady as she goes, consensual, seeking compromise. That's her legacy. That's her reputation. And on issues from technology to trade to a rising China to Russia, you might not have liked her policies. You might not have thought she was maybe right enough or left enough for you, but what she did do is manage to at least lead a unified, cohesive European response. It's going to be extremely difficult for any next chancellor, no matter how charismatic, no matter how potentially capable of mobilizing a grand coalition of at least three parties. No one's going to be able to fill those shoes. No one is going to. This could be the end of a Merkel-style consensus-seeking, post-war, stable/prosperous German governance model. It's a giant moment in German history right now. For Angela Merkel, she's probably happy to see the back of this chancellorship. She sees how loud and boisterous and messy it's getting, the polarization, the inability to really make your voice heard above the fray, and she probably knows that she had the good fortune, in a way, of presiding over Germany in its golden years, in a sense, when it was at its strongest, at a time when everything else was weakening. I'll add with the thought that she was perhaps the mediator, the person who was able to compromise in a Europe where these centrifugal forces were pulling Europe apart and weakening Europe. And we're seeing that right now start to play out in a big way in Germany.
It's hard to imagine, Doug, that in this day and age, it's so hard to find leaders that are so good at compromise and negotiating.
Absolutely.
But it's the way it is. Doug, Herbert, thank you so much for that analysis there.